Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and especially if you're new to the channel, man. Nobody's going to forget when Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz Jr., right? No matter what happens in Anthony Joshua's career from now on to the day he retires, people will always go back and revisit this fight and mention the fact that even if Joshua went on to to never lose a fight again, when they go back and review his career, they're gonna talk about the fact that he lost to Andy Ruiz Jr. So his loss against Andy Ruiz Jr. is very significant, right? It plays like a major role in his career because people will always go back and look at that. Just like when you look at Lennox Lewis's career, you always go back and say, oh, look, remember when Hasim Rahman knocked out Lennox Lewis? Remember when Oliver McCall knocked out Lennox Lewis? Even though he got revenge, people always go back to that, right? So it's like they play a significant roles. Losses play a significant roles in a boxer's career because you go back and look at that and say, oh, this is the guy who beat him, right? So Andy Ruiz is always going to be known. He's always going to be known as the guy that beat Anthony Joshua. So this is why him fighting Deontay Wilder is a really, really good move for Deontay Wilder. Because imagine if Deontay Wilder fights Andy Ruiz Jr. and imagine he knocks him out viciously. Let's say he knocks him out Dominic Brazil style, right? Tyson Fury round 12 style, where you just see the guy, Arthur Spilka style, where you just see the guy on the floor unconscious and he's not breathing. Now, we all know that Deontay Wilder is very capable of doing that against Andy Ruiz Jr., who's a very slow, fat guy. He's fast with his hands, but he's slow on his feet, all right? Imagine if he were to do that against Andy Ruiz Jr., the only guy to beat Anthony Joshua, basically Anthony Joshua's conqueror. That's making a statement, all right? Whoever beats Andy Ruiz Jr., especially whoever knocks him out in the future, is going to be mentioned as a future opponent for Anthony Joshua's title because they're going to be like, oh, shit, he knocked out Andy Ruiz Jr., the guy who knocked out Anthony Joshua. I want to see that guy face Anthony Joshua now. So if Andy Ruiz Jr. fights Deontay Wilder, that's a really, really good look, especially if Wilder knocks him out, because now people are going to be interested in watching Wilder versus Anthony Joshua again, right? People are going to be like, oh, shit, just look at how much of a better job Deontay Wilder did compared to Anthony Joshua, because, again, I know that Anthony Joshua beat Andy Ruiz Jr. in the rematch, and he got his vindication, he got his revenge. But let's be serious, and let's be real here. That was a stinker of a fight. Anthony Joshua fought a very strategic, I'm going to go the distance, safety first type of fight. He wasn't engaging as much as he was in the first fight because he didn't want to allow Andy Ruiz Jr. to catch him again because he saw what happened. So he fought a smart fight, and it was kind of a stinker. I was kind of, bored a bit watching that fight, to be honest with you. So even though he won and got his revenge, it wasn't the most entertaining fight, right? So imagine if Wilder went in there and knocks him out cold, does a better job, obviously, than Anthony Joshua. That is going to rise his stock, right? And people are going to forget because you're only as good as your last performance. People are going to probably look at that and they're going to just be talking about that. They're going to forget about the fact that Wilder lost his WBC title and got beat up against Tyson Fury. They're just going to be like, oh, man, he knocked out the guy that knocked out Anthony Joshua. I want to see him against Anthony Joshua. That's what the people are going to be thinking, realistically, especially casual boxing fans. But that's what they're going to be doing, and they're going to be hyped up to see Joshua in there with Wilder, and that's going to raise Wilder's stock as a fighter. People are going to start demanding that, right? I'm glad that Wilder is considering facing him because you'll get way more credibility knocking out somebody like a Andy Ruiz Jr. than knocking out some Joe Smo guy that nobody cared about. Like if he fought Ajit, that would be trash, right? Nobody would care about that. So I think this is a good move for Wilder career-wise because I think it helps build his stock up. And I really hope he goes through with it. I hope Andy Ruiz is willing to step up and fight Deontay Wilder. That's a great match on the PBC. It's better than any other match in the PBC because he's a more credible opponent than any other PBC heavyweight, in my opinion, currently.